Good evening, it's Elam. Um, I want to apologize for my delusions of grandeur video. I'm going to try to make this quick and friendly. Um, they will always deny with their mouths what their hands are doing. Um, the people that run the world, as they're moving towards tyranny, they will always deny it all the way to the bank. They will never, ever admit it. They will always, when you twist their arm, they will always say the same thing, which is, "Oh no, I'm not doing that." Right? And you'll be like, "I saw you. Is your hand doing that?" And they'll say, in a court of law, on the Bible, they'll say, um, you know, "We think it's very," or called in front of Congress, they'll say, "We think it's extremely important to protect the environment," right while they're dumping stuff out, for example. Doesn't matter what it is. The point is, they will just vehemently deny what they are doing as they are doing it because they know denying what they are doing as they're doing it confuses and obfuscates and allows them to continue doing what they're doing. And so that's a really important concept to keep in mind. I think the best way to drill it home in your mind so you can understand the Illuminati or the nefarious agenda is imagine like a serial killer who all the way, the whole time, like as you're chained up and getting tortured, he says, "Oh no, I'm not chaining you up. You're my guest. I mean no ill will towards you at all. I'm not torturing you. I just need to do this for your own good. And then you can leave, and then you can leave tomorrow." And every day he comes back and says, "Oh, um, we're just gonna need to keep you one more day. It's for your own benefit." Like a really nice, like extremely verbally, uh, kind of exactly what you want to hear, while at the same time hurting you and getting worse over time. But it'd be a creepy kind of killer, right? Well, that's our enemy. That's what the devil does. So anyway, this is my website. This artwork I took from online. I saw it, and then so I've been doing some research into BlackRock, and I just did a quick Google, and I think it's interesting that it had a 1.6 stars, and the first comment is the company is the opposite of their mission statement. They are buying up affordable low-income housing in California and charging mansion prices for an apartment built in the 70s. Okay. And then the mission statement is we're in, we're investing on the future on behalf of our clients, inspiring our employees, supporting our local communities, you know, supporting our local communities while at the same time destroying them. And that's a perfect example of how the enemy, uh, what their modus operandi is. So here we have some imagery of BlackRock. Um, it's more than just that tiny office in Santa Monica. I think this is a good image of it. But they own basically everything. Basically, they're the majority. Them and Vanguard. Um, they're the majority stockholders of almost every single notable publicly traded company. So when a company is public, it's actually just literally theirs at that point because they just buy all the stock. And I thought it was interesting their name, Black Rock. And I couldn't help but think of, I wonder if any of them have ever made a joke about the Bible and saying, because they like to plagiarize God, and they might say something like, I built my house on the black rock. You know, the winds came, but I was built on a rock, because that's what Jesus said. Jesus said, I am the rock. But he is the white rock, not the black rock. And the white rock is glistening 117 times this amount, times 117, times 777. But anyway, Mammon is the prince of hell for like greed and like money, and it's not money that's bad. It's actually Mammon. That's the root of all evil, and it's what money can do to you with greed and materialism. And Alexander the Great asked to be buried. On his way to the burial, he asked to have his wealth scattered um, on the way, so everyone would know and see how all his riches, none of it he could take with him after death. And anyway, edify one another. Edify means teach. So that's what I try to do. And Jordan Peterson is one of my teachers, and he has a very interesting take on the Bible. Some people call themselves Christian atheists, because what Jordan Peterson does is analyzes, as a psychologist, a clinical psychologist, the significance of the biblical stories. And um, he did a series on Genesis that's probably his most popular, and it's really beautiful and insightful. And I was listening to him today, and he was basically, it reminded me how one of my Christian friends says, be careful with Jordan Peterson, because he actually, sometimes he doesn't go far enough. He's not religious enough, or not Christian enough, or conspiratorial enough, but the beauty of his mind is he he analyzes the psychological significance of whether or not the Bible was true. The story itself is true, and we are wise to learn from it. And he talks about how it's like Jesus Christ is the archetype of the tragic hero, because what a tragic hero is someone who is blameless but gets killed. And not only was he blameless, he was good. He was as good as it gets. And not only was he killed, but he was crucified, which is kind of as bad as it gets. So that's the ultimate tragic hero. But then he points out, but then there's another chapter, there's the resurrection. So it's the most tragic story of all time, and then a happy ending. And he says that inoculates us, um, by leaning into the suffering of Christ. It inoculates us to suffering, because we know that there's redemption or resurrection on the other side of suffering. And he talks about when Moses leads out, like the best example I can give is he talks about when Moses leads the Israelites out of the tyranny, because that's where we are. We're in tyranny, and I'm saying, let my people go. And, you know, I have nowhere to take you. Like, Cloudland is a desert. But if we leave the tyranny and we go into the desert is actually worse than the tyranny in a sense, or maybe it's better. It's basically debatable. Do you want to stay in the tyranny or go to the desert of Cloudland with the chance of paradise? And the Israelites follow him into the desert, but then they start to lose their faith in God and uh, in Moses, and they say, we're going to worship other gods. And then what does the Lord God do in the Bible? He sends them poisonous snakes to bite them. And Jordan Peterson was pointing out how even when you leave tyranny, you end up in a desert, which isn't even any better. And then when you're in the desert, then the snakes come and make it even worse. And he's pointing out that no matter how bad it is, it can always get worse. But he also points out that the story is the guys go up to Moses in the desert with the snakes and say, can you talk to God and ask him to get rid of these snakes? We're sorry. We worship the false gods out here. We're just thirsty. Like, what can you, and God tells Moses to get one of those snakes and he turns it into a staff. And it's a snake staff. And then he tells the people to look at it, and then it's something about inoculation, like, and I'm anti-max, anti-vaccine, I'm Elam, but the point is the spiritual inoculation of fighting evil, and like, I don't know, another point he makes is like problems are like hydras, like you go to finish one of your chores and or pick up a pile of old papers to organize and seven new heads pop out. When you slay the one chore, three other chores pop up, and it's like a hydra, and that's like a visual representation of what human beings are up against. So anyway, he has all these brilliant points, and what I want to point out is he's not taking away from the religious truth of whether God really did speak to Moses and really did do these miracles. Because, in my opinion, what God was doing was with reality, with what would become recorded history, he was also telling a story. So that when those people are out there in that desert thinking, what part of God's plan is us leaving tyranny and then being in the desert? Well, part of God's plan is everyone for countless generations reading that story that are under tyranny and learning that when we get out of tyranny, we have to walk through a desert before we get to paradise. And the desert, do you see what I mean? So it's both. It's God really did come down and help out, but he also did it in such a way that would last forever, narratively. So it's showcasing God's genius in such a way that I have never seen before. It's probably got a name for it that only God knows, like narrative synchronicity, or the real, like the way Jordan Peterson puts it is Jesus Christ is where narrative and reality touch, because he's the ultimate archetypal tragic hero, and yet he's also a real person. So another most interesting thing, I've been keeping my eye on Moses because my friend told me uh, that I was Moses, essentially, like in their dream or something like that. So I've just been kind of like, because I didn't know anything really about Moses. But anyway, um, one super interesting thing is that when I looked up Moses and was trying to learn about Moses, and think about it on my own terms. Like if I'm Moses, then what does that mean? Well, Moses is the guy who leads the people to the promised land. But when they get there, he doesn't get to go in. Only the people he leads there goes in. And so I thought, maybe that means I can lead people, I can save souls and get them into heaven, but I don't actually get to go in. And okay, I'm at peace with that if that's my destiny. But the reason God punished Moses in that way, and I'm still learning about it, but the reason why is because in the desert, God told Moses, hey, there's a rock, and if you speak to the rock, it will turn into water, because they're all dying of thirst in the desert. And Moses has led them there into the desert with the idea of God and the promised land and escaping tyranny. And so the people are all beholden to Moses, and Moses is like to God, hey, can we have something to drink? God says, look at that rock and speak to it, and it will give you all water. And Moses has his magical staff from snakes, and instead of speaking to the rock, he just hits it. He just strikes it. And then the rock turns into water, and they all drink, and everything's good. But Moses has disobeyed God because he was only supposed to speak to the rock. He wasn't supposed to strike it. So then later on, they need water again, and God says, why don't you strike the rock this time? Because God knows that Moses prefers to strike the rock, I guess. So then Moses strikes the rock the second time. And this is why God is so mad, is because the rock was only meant to be struck once. The rock, in reality, that really was God feeding those people or giving them something to drink, that rock was a narrative representation of Christ. God himself knew he was going to come down later and say, I am the rock and I give living water. God knew that then. And so he's like, damn it, Moses, you just messed up my story. So you don't get to go to the paradise. Because now people like Elam are confused because the rock has to be struck twice when God intended the rock to only be struck once, because you were supposed to speak to it once and then strike it once. But because Moses struck it both times, the rock has to be struck twice. Jesus was only crucified once. So we need another crucifixion, or we don't. But Moses striking the rock twice is enough to cause confusion for other people to think that they're Jesus. And I don't think I'm Jesus. I think I'm Elam. But you can't spell the lamb without Elam. You just can't. Even if you wanted to. And so democracy, self-representative democracy that we have is just tyranny in disguise. If the Black Rock is buying the politicians and owns the ownership share of all the news networks, and all the news networks are literally saying the same creepy line, like, this is extremely dangerous to our democracy. Like, this is extremely dangerous. There's videos of them all saying the same thing. Like, the teleprompters were all identical on 300 different channels. It's creepy, dude. That's the world you live in. And, I'm going to try to build my house on the white rock, you know, of the anointed one, of Jesus. And so I did all that. Okay, last thing, I just watched a video called Give God Your Battle. And basically, um, obviously, I'm not doing that. That's my biggest problem. And the reason I don't give God the battle is I'm worried that, well, what if I'm part of the plan and I don't hold up my end? But then it occurred to me the other day, in honoring God and submitting before God, I'm basically saying, you know what, God, you know what I believe? I believe that if I died right now, you would still succeed. If I started going against you as hard as I could from this moment forward, it would change nothing. As far as your ultimate plan will still come to fruition, like New Jerusalem will be founded in God's name, God's grace, with or without Elon. And the battle of me versus the entire control system is a losing battle, and it's frustrating. And so maybe it's not my battle, and I should just let God fight that battle and just play my part. But the question is, what is my part? And I can't help but think I'm a leader type of part, an integral part. Um, so that's my biggest struggle. Uh, but I did need that message. I think I could give him the battle and just be me for now. Um, you know, obviously I've gone too far with my previous video calling out every man basically in the world. It doesn't make me feel good to do that. I forgive myself for that. I forgive every man. Um, God bless every soul and soulless creature. But that's pretty much it. They will always deny with their mouths what their hands are doing. So stop listening to them and start following the money, or following, like, why is, you know, it doesn't matter what they say their priorities are, or what they're doing, and we're gonna fight climate change. I'm Bill Gates. I'm gonna, I care about public health, and I'm. But what is he really doing? And what could he be doing instead? He's buying up like farmland, and like life. Life is a game of Monopoly that already started before you were born, and they already won 100 times before you started playing, and they have all the money and all the property, and you're just rolling your dice. And it's literally impossible. Um, but you can still have fun playing. I'm just saying, unless they're letting you win, unless you're serving their ends, you're not gonna win. Um, and like, you can go work for BlackRock, and they'll pay you as long as you're making them win the game, as long as it's part of their plan. But I have other plans. God's plan. Do 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 do. Anyway, I get carried away, but my mind is fixed on the Lord Jesus, and I try to imagine what He would do in my position, and uh, you know, I just thought that that's what I was supposed to do. But I'm gonna give God my battle, and He's gonna win for me, and I'll just be me, man. But yeah, I'm still gonna try um, to be a good king of my Cloudland, and I hope one day I can make it a reality more than it already is, a larger part of reality. And thanks for listening. Hope you found it interesting. And let's end on a Bible verse because I want to be a better Christian. Jesus, this is Jesus talking. He says his burden is light. And I'm not so sure because the sex thing is tough. I love this one. Um, entertain strangers because they might be angels and you don't realize it. I don't think there's a single. That's a good one. Yeah, I'm crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. Yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. And that's correct. Jesus is the rock that was struck and gave us living water of eternal life. And, you know, we don't need to strike the rock twice. God intended for it to be struck once. I don't know, it's confusing, but you get what I'm trying to say? That's where the confusion comes from. That's Moses' punishment. It's for confusing the narrative. So all we can do is obey God and trust God's superior intelligence and plan. And I want to try to think of a word for that type of planning. It's like divine. Um, it's like he's doing two things at the same time. It's like divine, simultaneous structuring or something. It's basically divine temporal storytelling or like divine um, like from up here he's doing something down here knowing that it'll have an effect over here, so it's like outside out, outer temporal divinity of story and reality, like this the narrative reality of divine temporal justice. Let's leave it